For today's video, I'm very excited and honored to show you the new auto support system found within Lychee Slicer. But first, I need to show you where the tool is and how to use it. After that, grab yourself a beverage of choice, sit down, get comfortable, and pay attention, because we're going to get into how this tool works kind of under the hood. It's going to be a rather deep dive, so make sure to stay tuned for the entire video. So here I've got Thor, the God of Thunder, created by Overhangs. In a previous video, I supported Thor, and it took about 25 or so minutes. So let's see how good of a job the new Lychee Slicer auto supports can do with this model in much, much less time. So to do that, what I've got right here is this is the one that I supported in about that 20 to 30 minutes is about how long it took. And you can kind of see where the supports look right here. This is the one that we're going to support in a few seconds. To do that, we're going to click on Prepare. And we're going to click on the Auto tab here on the right. From there, you'll see we've got the Classic. Now, this is something really important about this tool. This tool does not replace the Magic Button or the Classic supports. It's going to live alongside it. And this is also called Lychee Support Plus, which means this is for the Lychee Plus or the Lychee Library users. If you're a Lychee Free user, all the tools you've used pretty much up to this point are still going to be there, and you're going to use them and access them the same way you always have before. So to use it, we're going to go over it and click on the plus right here, and then you have a drop down to select your pre-support. Out of the gate, it's got a default preset. Now this default preset is something we've been kind of working on under the hood. However, I will say it's definitely not perfect. It has some room for improvement, and over time we are going to continue to update this preset, as well as we're going to add the button for you to export or import new presets. That way the community gets to go through and create their own presets and share them with everybody. But then that brings the question, what is a preset? Well, let me show you what that is after I run the auto support on this figure. From there, we're just going to click on the model we want to run the auto supports on. And then there's a button that says Generate Auto Supports. Let's click on that one. And let's see how long it takes. About 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about 7 or 8 seconds. And this guy is auto supported. So let's see how it compares between the two here. I'm just going to go to visibility, and we're going to select just the tips on both of these guys. And let's just kind of get an idea of how it looks overall in general. And I think ultimately they're pretty similar. Yeah, it's definitely not bad. Would it print? I think it would print. And would it print well? I think it would print well. But there's something you might notice, and that's all the color tips on this guy, where the one on the left has color tips and on the one on the right doesn't. So let's explain what these tips mean and kind of how you can adjust those with the presets that we talked about earlier. You can see what each of these colors represent over here on the right. You see they're listed as Island, Reinforcement, Overhang, and Stabilization. We can even turn these on or off. Now turning them on or off is just hiding them. The supports are still there, so if you render this or slice it, the supports are still going to be there. You're just turning off whether you can see them or not in the slicer. So we can turn off each one and just isolate them one at a time. So here we can see all the overhang supports that were placed, which were placed on the overhangs of the object. Or if we just want to see the islands, we can see all the different islands that were supported just by isolating those. And then of course, we've got the reinforcement, which I'll explain what reinforcement is here a little bit later on in the video. And then also stabilization, same thing, I'll kind of explain what that means later on in this video. And now let's talk about those presets. And this is very important. This is what's going to make this tool very, very different from the original auto support. In the original auto support, you click the button, you kind of get what you get. Depending on how you change the orientation is about as much control as you get. With this new system, it's not going to auto-orientate for you. You're going to have to do that yourself or use the original orientate button. But for this one, you have full control of pretty much everything else. And that's where this is really more of a framework than it is a button. And of course, we're going to be able to update and share our own presets with everybody. So this framework is something that you can either work on, like fine-tuning it yourself, or kind of wait for the community to fine-tune it for you and share with you the results. But anyway, let's get diving into it. To find these presets, over here, you're just going to click on the drop-down, and you have the default preset. We're going to click on the gear, and I'm just going to click on duplicate. You can't edit the default preset. It's the one that's going to be set up by us, Lychee. And like I said, we may update it from time to time, but you'll always be able to make a copy of it if you wish. I'm just going to take this copy. I'm just going to name this Mini, because I'm going to make this for my miniatures. I'm just going to click OK, and that's going to save it. So now under here, you'll see I've got the miniature and the default. So if I want to edit the miniature, I'll just click on the gear and click on Edit. Now from here, you're going to see there's a couple tabs. There's the Global tab. After that, we've got the first island layer, then the island reinforcements, overhang, and stabilization, which are those things I showed you earlier with the different colors. This is where we can fine-tune each one of these different types of supports and even turn them on or turn them off completely so they don't even run on our particular model. But first, we're just going to start with global settings. And the very first one here is auto bracing. And if you watched my video on bracing, you'll see where I created this one I called for science, and I've just left it there. I'm going to use that one for my auto bracing, but of course you got the regular defaults within Lychee. So whatever you set here is what's going to be used on every model automatically. The next one is path to ground. If you don't know what that means, let's just say I've got a really complicated model with some crazy geometry like my mouse here. And if it can't find a path to ground, let's say 20 millimeters is about how far it can go out to try to find a path to ground. And it can't because let's say the overhang is just too much, like the skeleton structure, then it would have to place a support where both the top and the bottom make contact with the model because there's no path to ground. So that 20 millimeter just says how far it can go away from the support tip to find that path. I have it set to 20. Well, actually, no, for me, I like to set mine up to 30. I don't mind if it has a little bit of a stretch, so I pull mine up to about 30 millimeters. The next one, of course, is the raft type you're going to use. For minis, I generally do like the shaped wall, but the line triangle is a second favorite. The next one is auto lift, probably self-explanatory, just how much it's going to lift the object off the build plate, or just make sure it's at least here, 5 millimeters. I'm just going to leave this one alone at 5. For snap to grid, this is just where all the support bases are going to snap to a grid pattern. Each one will be 5 millimeters apart, according to the setting, 5 millimeters. For miniature, maybe 4 might be better than 5, but we can try it. We can always come back here and adjust this later if we want. The next tab is island first layer, and this is where things start to get a little bit complicated. But here we break down the islands into 3 main sizes, small, medium, and large. This is, you can also set a support preset to each one of these ones, just using the drop down here. So right now for small island, it would use the preset light, which is probably fine. But for me, I'm actually going to go down to ultralight for something like a miniature type preset. If I'm going to do maybe a preset for larger objects, I would probably use a larger support tip like a light. The next thing here is density. Now density here is a little bit confusing because by density, what we don't mean is there's going to be an island every, let's say on this one, it's set to 1.3 millimeters. It's not saying that there can't be other islands 1.3 millimeters away. The model dictates the islands and how close they are. What this is saying is something a little bit different. This 1.3 millimeters is actually creating a sphere of don't place other reinforcements within 1.3 millimeters. The reinforcement being the other type of support type. So here on this model, what I've done is I've ran my support algorithm and I've got an island right here. I can tell by the color. And if I click on it, it'll show as it being an ultralight, which tells me this is detected as being a small island. You also see there's another small island right next to it that's very, very close. Well, here's this sphere that's got a diameter of 1.3 millimeters, the same I set in that setting. Let's move this up to where it's about where that point of that island is. And you'll see it actually bleeds over the second island. So these 2 islands right here are within the diameter of that sphere. Again, that's because that sphere isn't telling it that other islands can't be supported. What it's actually telling you is the other support types can't be placed within the area of that sphere or the influence of that sphere. And just in case the conversation around density for the first island wasn't confusing enough, there's a little bit more to it. Let me show you. So here under large islands, I got the density set to 1.8 millimeters. We've already talked about how that's going to push island reinforcements 1.8 millimeters away. But what happens if we have a really, really large island? For that, let's show you these 2 boxes. Here I've got one island that's this big flat surface. The way islands are calculated in Lychee is first we're going to look at the surface area of an island. Because this thing is parallel to the build plate, it's one big 2-dimensional island. The one that's a knife's edge over here, it's basically like a 1-dimensional island, but it's still rather long. And then it's going to calculate the total volume, basically being this entire cube. Because this cube's so large, or really just one big large island, we're going to be using the heavy. As we can see here, if we click on this one, we can see it's a heavy support, which means each of these heavy supports are going to be 1.8 millimeters apart from each other. This one being 2-dimensional, this one being 1-dimensional. And then as you can see, the orange ones or the pink ones are also being pushed out by that 1.8 millimeter. So that's a place where that density on islands can mean multiple things at the exact same time. The next one is the minimum area. Now, initially we were doing it based upon cross section, but that's been updated to do it cubed. So we're actually doing it on volume. So the UI on this one's a little bit out of date. We'll make sure that gets updated in the next version. But that's essentially how we're going to detect between medium, small, and large islands is based on volume of the entire object. So right now it's set to 0 because you want to detect everything, going up. Then 2.4 and 3.2. Now we can adjust these to determine what we think is a small, medium, or large island. So if I look at this object right here as an example, and I say, hey, this one right here is showing up as a heavy, that's probably good. Maybe on this one right here showing up as a heavy as well, I'm thinking, I don't know if I want this to show up as a heavy. Can I maybe reduce those numbers to get this show up as a medium, but this one still show up as a heavy? And maybe that would be a better algorithm or a better preset. So I can come in here and I can start playing around with that one. I can click on the gear, edit, go to the first island, and just say, well, I think maybe for the large ones, I'm going to boost that up just a little bit. So it has to be a little bit larger in order for it to be determined a heavy. So let's say from 3.2, let's just set it to 5 to see what that does. This one's 3.4, and let's just move it to 3. We're going to hit OK, and we're going to run the support again and just kind of see what happens. Now here I can click back on that support tip and realize it's still showing as a heavy, so I didn't go enough. So at this point, I just have to keep making them larger and larger and larger until this one popped in as a medium, and this one hopefully continued to be a heavy as well. You just kind of have to dial those in, and that's where you can essentially start working with the presets, just adjusting these numbers, run the pre-supports, until you get to a setting that you're really happy with. The next one down here can be pretty powerful, so it's kind of like use it, but understand what it's doing and how it can both help you or hurt you if you used it incorrectly. And that's ignore small islands. And when it says ignore, it truly means ignore, as in they will not be part of the algorithm, they won't be highlighted or anything like that. That one. The system will pretend that they don't exist at all. To show you what this looks like, let's first turn it off. And I'm going to come over to this Thor model and I'm going to run the auto support again. And that's because right here on his arm, there's a ton of really, really detailed texture. So at this point, I'm telling Lychee Slicer to support every island, no matter how small it is. But another important thing to notate is that this is based upon the layer height that you have set in the resin profile. Right now, I have a resin profile set to 0.03 millimeters, so it's going to find islands based upon anything that falls within that height. So any island that's smaller than one layer or 0.03 millimeters in height will not be detected. But right there, we can see if we look at his arm, I think 0.03 millimeters or 3 millimeters is enough to find a tremendous amount of islands on something like this texture. Just to show you what this texture looks like, let's delete all these. And you can see this is what's triggering all of those supports, just that massive amount. Also, remember what I said earlier, every island is going to be the origin point of the rest of basically the programming. And so every island is going to spawn a support and then all of the other stuff around it. So what we want to do is we don't want that. I'm going to go back in here to the system, click on edit, and then let's go back and let's turn back on ignore small islands. Now this is also a bit of a need to know on this tool. This volume and height isn't a this or that, it's a this and that. So any support that has a volume smaller than 0.1 millimeters cubed, which is tiny, that is also under 0.8 millimeters in height, then we will ignore that island, as in it doesn't exist at all. So if we run that algorithm again with those in there, we're going to see that instead of having tons and tons of supports, we only have a couple. And if I still think this is too many, I can go in here and I can dial that down even more. I can kind of carve off more and more and more small islands that just won't be detected by the system and completely ignored. But that's generally the point of that tool, is we're aware that there are textures like this, then we don't want a million islands on. So we've included that option in there to go through and have you, the user, kind of dial that back and where you find is a good balance between over supporting and under supporting things like textures. And now we're to something we've already talked a little bit about, and that's island reinforcement. Now remember, island reinforcements are basically going to be spawned around islands. And these are the support tips that are going to be placed the closest to them. We've already talked about how every island creates a sphere of basically don't place any supports here. But after that one, that's where these settings apply. Right here, what you have, of course, is the minimum volume. And this is volume. So this is where saying if an island is smaller than this, don't place any reinforcements. If it's larger, equal, or larger to than the setting, place these reinforcements. And again, we have 3 presets. So you can determine as the island is larger in volume, then we're going to place a larger and larger support up to 3 different presets. And that's where you can set these here just by clicking on the drop down. Same thing as kind of the islands themselves. The next one we have is the height. Now the height is just a ceiling saying no supports can be placed above 1.5 millimeters from the floor. The floor in this case being the island itself. Underneath that, we have the density. So the density is basically saying that no reinforcements can be placed within 1.8 millimeters of each other. Of course, the other ones still apply. If I remember when I said earlier, if we go back to the density over here, those reinforcements can't be placed closer than 1.3 millimeters from the island, but they also can't be placed closer than 1.8 millimeters from each other, and cannot be placed above 1.5 millimeters above from where the island itself is. It's kind of a lot to go through, but I think once it kind of clicks, it's pretty easy to understand. And finally, an easy one to explain, and that's overhang. Overhang is pretty simple. You got 90 degrees right here, like 0 degrees and 45. So as you get closer and closer, that overhang becomes more and more dangerous to print, I would say, in Resin 3D printing. It's going to become shallower. So like 20 degrees, 10 degrees, 5 degrees, and up here, back up to 90. So basically what this is saying is it's set as 40 degrees. So if this was 45, 40 would be a little bit more shallow. So at 40 degrees, 45, we wouldn't place any supports, but anything that's 40 degrees, we would place supports. So essentially anything greater than that number is what is ignored. Anything less than that number is where we're going to place supports. And here again, we get to set the support preset. If I click on this, I like to make mine probably a light. For miniatures, maybe for something larger, I would do a medium. But for miniatures that are very, very small, I'm going to set my support preset to light. The next option I want to talk about in overhang is the minimum area. Now this one's really, really important. Let me kind of show you why. If I look at this big guy right here and I move him so you can see the overhang, everything here in yellow is Lychee's determining as an overhang. And if you don't know this, you can actually set that what's going to be the checkered pattern matches with what you have set in your presets. To do that, you click on File, Preferences, and then from here, we're going to go down to Support menu, and here you set Overhang Angle, and I've got set that to 40 degrees. And if you look over here under my setting, under the overhang, I also have that set to 40 degrees. So these two match right now. You don't have to do this, but it just makes it visually easier to kind of, well, visualize. So what we can see here is everything that's checkerboard is 40 degrees, which you would think would tell the system to go through and put us overhang support over all the overhangs. But just because everything here is being listed as being an overhang doesn't mean it's going to get a support. For example, if I zoom in and I look at maybe some of these small tufts of hair, their overall volume is going to be relatively small, probably smaller than the setting I have set in the overhang, which means they will be excluded from getting that medium, light, or heavy, or whatever support type you choose to be listed as overhang. And the last setting I want to talk about in overhang is the density. Here I've got the density set to 3.8 millimeters, which is going to say no support tip can be placed any closer than 3.8 millimeters. To show you what that looks like, I ran it on this cube right here, and each one of these yellow supports cannot be placed any closer than 1.8 millimeters. Here's one where I've changed it to 1.5 millimeters, and you can see they're much more densely packed. So again, just another setting you can kind of play with until you find out what works best for you. And now we're to the final tab, which is stabilization. Something important to notate that these tabs actually run in tandem as far as the programming goes. So first it's going to look for the island, then it's going to do the island reinforcements, then it's going to do overhang, then it's going to do stabilization. And again, you can turn each one of these off or on individually. And it's just going to kind of push the other settings a little closer to each other. It's not going to leave a gap. So for example, if I have an island and I turned off the island stabilization, it's not going to push the overhang away. It's actually going to bring the overhang to kind of fill in the gap of where the island stabilization would have been. But over here in the very last one, regular stabilization, for these ones, I like to use a very, very small support tip. I'm going to go down to my ultralight. I may even eventually create something that's even smaller, because the point of stabilization supports are not to hold weight of the object, it's simply to keep things from shifting and moving and creating layer lines. So these particular settings, maybe you want to use them, maybe you don't, but I like to set them to be a very, very low density, and the minimum area I can even turn up as well. Because again, I'm also really only caring about trying to stabilize maybe heavier objects I'm worrying about shifting during the print. Another important note is that the stabilization ports are not looking for overhangs. They're just looking to see if they can stabilize the object a little bit better. Like on this cube right here, you'll see that the green ones, the stabilization, are placed on, well, not overhangs, they're just placed on the blue part. So again, whether you choose to use these or not are up to you. You can always just go in there and turn them on or turn them off, or just play with the setting until you find something that you like. So now that I've explained what each of the colors mean and kind of how to adjust them, I ran some auto supports on just some random figures that I've printed in the past. Let's look at them and just kind of see how it looks to us. First, I want to look at this big cloak right here. I think it's a pretty fun model. It's very thin and very tall. What we can see here is we're seeing a lot more of the stabilization supports. I think that's just because how tall it is. So what I might do on this one is I might go through and kind of turn that down a little bit. On the back, I'm okay with the stabilization supports as they are. On the front though, I think I might want a bit less. If I look in the bottom, the yellow ones, the overhangs, I would say I'm okayly happy with how many they are. I think what I probably want to do is go through and actually just turn that up a little bit. I would think I would like it if these were just slightly closer to each other. And that's really easy to do. If I just click on it, go back to my support right here, click on edit, go down to overhang. I set to 3.3 or 3.8. Let's just change that to 3 and see how it does. Click OK. And I can very, very quickly just generate the system again. We're going to delete the supports that were there before and not keep them. That is an option, by the way. You can go through and add your supports and then just auto support over it. And the supports you place there first will be left there. They won't be deleted anymore, like in the older version of the auto support algorithm. And I can see after making that adjustment, the overhangs are all slightly closer together and there's a few more of them. So from here, I can kind of just keep doing that, just keep tweaking it. Change a setting, run it, change a setting, run it, until I find a setting that I really like for a taller object like this one. If we look at this leg right here, what I can see is I'm actually pretty happy with most of the supports, but maybe I don't want that many stabilizations, or maybe I just want to turn them off altogether. I can just go over here and edit that real quick. Click on edit, go over to stabilization. I'm just going to turn it off. Click OK. I'm just gonna run the support again. And this time I should run it without any of the green ones. Let's see if I like it after that. So here it is without the stabilization. On this one, probably what I would do is I'd want to increase the overhang just by a little bit more. And then again, I would probably save this preset as like a tall object versus a mini. So far I was creating more of a presetting for mini supports, not necessarily for tall objects like this one. So I think this one's getting close, but it needs a little bit more fine tuning. What about something like this hood, which is relatively short, but a very big overhang? We can kind of look at it and see, I actually think the overhang on this one is pretty good. Overall, I think this one's quite close, maybe just a little bit more adjustments on that one, but I'm liking what I'm seeing so far. I think this would print without really much of an issue at all as it is right now. And there's one last important thing I need to talk about, and that is mini supports. If you've used the auto support system before, you'll know that Lychee uses mini supports. But for right now, those have been disabled for the plus version of the auto support system. They're just not quite ready to turn on yet. So what this means is you may have islands that are yet to be supported, and you'll have to go in and manually do that after the fact. But there's a little tool we've added to make that a little bit easier. To use that tool, just click on the object, and right here you see it says 8 unsupported points. I'm just gonna click on show. And this is gonna move my camera around and show me each of those points where the system would have placed a mini support if we allowed it. From here, I can just go through and choose whether or not I wanna place a support. So I can either place one, or if I don't wanna place one, I don't like it, I'll just hit the trash can right here, and that will remove the point from showing up again. And just basically gonna go through and do that. You're gonna place it, delete it, or whatever you want until the object at that point is ready to be printed. And well, that's pretty much it. At this point, you just print the object and you're done. And you know the drill by now. Make sure to like and subscribe to the Lychee YouTube channel. Join us on the Lychee Slicer Discord if you haven't already. And as always, thank you for watching and have yourself a very good day.